Hello, welcome to Career Success Strategies, Lesson 9, Part 3, Video Interview Etiquette. Video interviews can be nerve-wracking, especially if it's your first time. Many questions may cross your mind. How do I prepare for a video interview? What do I wear? What happens if my technology fails? Do I need a copy of my resume? How is my body language being conveyed? How do you give eye contact over a webcam? What are my next steps after the interview? Don't worry. We will be covering best methods to follow when preparing for virtual and pre-recorded interviews so you can ace it. As we've learned, due to the recent pandemic, video job interviews have become more popular, and many companies are regularly using technology to conduct preliminary interviews. Video interviews have similarities to traditional in-person interviews, but they also have many differences that you should be prepared for. For example, depending on the type of video interview you're participating in, there are some instances where you are just recording your answers instead of speaking with a live person on the other end. Once you know the type of video interview that will be conducted, you can begin to prepare. For a virtual interview, you want to follow these crucial steps to help you prepare for your interview. If a prospective employer shares a link with you to join a video conference, you want to be sure you have the most up-to-date version of that software. Do not wait until last minute to install any new updates. And if you don't have that software, be sure to download it to get familiar with the functions. If you are using a personal Skype or Google account, make sure you have a professional username. If you aren't sure if your username is professional, you can ask your career developer. As we learn, there are times when an employer will use pre-recorded video interviews. If a prospective employer gives you instructions on how to join the pre-recorded interview, they may send you a list of questions and a deadline to submit your answers. You will need to set up a camera and film yourself while you answer each question and then upload the video and send it back to the interviewer. And think back on the interview lessons you recently completed. Make a list of questions and answers and take your time thinking through these answers. What do you wear for a video interview? You must dress professionally. So even though you are not meeting your interviewer in person, it's important to dress professionally. You want to make a good first impression on the interviewer and let them know that you are serious about the company. You wear something clean, conservative, and business casual. You have to dress the part from head to toe. You never know if you will need to stand up, and if you do not want to be underdressed. We're going to go through some tips for a successful video interview. Testing your technology. You should always do a test run with the technology you're using. If it's in the computer lab, a personal laptop, or a phone, you need to get familiar with the software your prospective employer prefers. You can ask a friend, family member, or your career developer to join a video call with you for some additional practice. On the day of the interview, you should test the internet connection, audio, and sound to make sure everything is working properly. Don't wait until last minute. If you have technical difficulties, make sure to ask your interviewer well in advance before the interview starts for an alternative method, such as a phone call interview. You want to pick the perfect spot. Before your scheduled interview time, you will need to find a location. So there are a few things you should keep in mind when looking for the best spot to have your video interview. Find a well-lit location. You want the employer to see you clearly, so stay away from dark shadowed areas, and if possible, try to settle down near a window. You want to find a quiet, private area free from possible interruptions. You want the interviewer to know you are engaged and not distracted by anything around you. And you want to make sure your background is clear and neutral. A clear wall as your background will work well. Please put your cell phone on silent mode. The biggest distraction can be your cell phone ringing while having an interview. Gather your materials. Always have a copy of your resume on hand. Have a notebook and pen with you to take down any notes during your interview. Make a list of talking points that you would like to bring up in the interview. This will show that you are prepared, eager, and engaged. You can practice your main talking points if you're nervous And remember to slow down. It can be easy to talk over people on online calls. Prepare questions for the interviewer. Just like in an in-person interview, you should have questions to ask the interviewer. Look your interviewer in the eye. Even in an online environment, eye contact is important. And this may be difficult at first, which is why it's so important to practice with your friends, with your family, or with your career developer. Instead of looking at the interviewer on the screen, try looking directly into the webcam and stay engaged. Maintaining eye contact and nodding will show the interviewer that you are involved and listening attentively. Watch your body language. So whether it's a virtual interview or pre-recorded interview, it can feel unnatural. So be aware of your nonverbal cues. Remember to smile and nod when the interviewer speaks. Sit up straight and act as you would during an in-person interview. You want to follow up after the interview. Send a thank you email to the interviewer. If you've not heard back from the interviewer after a few days, reach out to them and ask them if the hiring process is still ongoing and if they need any more information from you. Remember to always thank the interviewer for their time. You can ask your career developer for assistance with formulating a professional follow-up email. We are now going to watch a video that's going to give us some tips for a successful video interview.
Brings me to our tip of the week, which is be prepared to be interviewed by phone or video chat. So I'll give you a couple of tips on how you can prepare. I would recommend that you dress for that interview as you would if you were interviewing in person. You can look online and try to get a sense of the company's culture, of their dress code. If you're unsure, business casual is usually a safe route to go. And you can also just reach out to the HR manager or to the HR department that you've been talking to and ask them about their company dress code. Another tip is to test your audio and video before the call. If you are someone who maybe you've never used video conferencing software before, I would recommend that well in advance of your interview, go online, download the software, play around with it, make sure you understand the features and that you just really get comfortable with it before that interview. If you can, ask a friend to do a test call with you, and that way you can work through some of those potential technical kinks ahead of time. Many of you may be doing these virtual interviews from home. And because you're doing that, it can be tempting to write down sort of a script for your answers so that you'll have exactly what you want to say in front of you when the question is asked. I would really encourage you to try not to do that. Instead, practice your answers ahead of time, become familiar and sort of comfortable with them in your mind, and maybe you can jot down just a couple of key words or phrases that are going to help trigger what you want to say. But it's going to feel much more conversational and natural if you don't have a script in front of you. And finally, try to find a quiet space with minimal distractions. Again, this one can be tough right now where many of us are home. I am talking to you from home right now, and if you have family there, it can be difficult to find that quiet space. But as best you can, just try to arrange ahead of time with your housemates, with your family, so that you can have a couple of minutes of quiet, uninterrupted time for your interview. Beyond those remote tips, you can really prepare as you would for any regular interview that you would go on. And let me give you just a couple of specific interview prep tips. First, research your potential employer. Indeed, company pages is a great place to start for that. If you haven't checked out company pages before, go to Indeed.com. If you look in the upper sort of left-hand side, you'll see a tab for company reviews. You can click on that, search for the name of the employer that you are going to be interviewing with, and that's going to take you to, in a lot of cases, a bunch of information about that employer. One of the things that you can find, for example, is commonly asked interview questions for that particular employer. So it's a great source of information as you're starting to do your homework. You can also check out the company's website, their social media posts, and recent press releases. Also, if you know anyone who works for that company, or maybe they work in the same industry, they can be a great source of information for you as well. Make it a point to understand the company's goals as you're doing this research, and that'll allow you during the interview to speak to the ways that you can really help support those goals in your new role. So a second interview tip, prepare questions to ask the interviewer. So often we think about being prepared for the questions that the interviewer is going to ask us, and that's a great thing to do. But many people often forget to do the reverse of that, which is to be ready with a couple of questions that you can ask the interviewer when they create that opportunity for you to do so. It is a great way to show your interest, to show your analytical capabilities, and just to show that you've done your homework. Let me share with you, here are a couple of questions that you might consider asking an interviewer in an interview. You could ask, how would you describe the characteristics of someone who would succeed in this role? What is the biggest challenge to success in this role? Or you might ask, how will my performance be measured? Remember, you are interviewing the company at the same time they are interviewing you. So you really want to think about which questions will help you decide if this role is the right fit for you. But I would say, with all of this, most of all, just use the interview as a chance to show your interviewer who you are and help them understand why you believe that you would be the best fit for that role. Thank you so much for tuning in.
We're going to talk through some do's and don'ts of video interviews. And this is to summarize everything we learned in the lesson today. You want to make sure you have the most updated software for your online interview and that you have a professional username. You want to practice virtual interviews with friends, family, or your career developer. You want to test the technology the day of the interview, just to be prepared and make sure everything is running smoothly. And you want to dress professionally from head to toe. You don't want to go into the interview unprepared without your resume, a notebook, and questions for the interviewer. You don't want to wait until the last minute to set up for the interview. You don't want to keep your phone on ringer or be in an area with distractions. And you don't want to forget to send a thank you note and follow up. Congratulations! You have successfully completed the video for Part 3 Video Interview Etiquette. Return to the Google Classroom classwork page and take the Lesson 9 Part 3 assessment. Good luck!